I think for me, enjoying like comes from wanting to relate to others and like relate to the world around me. Like feel accepted.
Yeah, yeah, we want to interact with others, yes. Krishna, very good, Krishna. We have this enjoying spirit. In fact, we can't suppress it. It's part of our, I want to say it's part of our DNA, but the DNA is a material thing. You can actually see and measure. The soul is not material. But our essence, that who we are, is composed of this enjoying spirit. It's Krishna has it, and we're part and parcel of Krishna. So we can't not have it. The difference, which is a significant difference, but not so easily understood sometimes, is that while we may possess the desire to enjoy, we don't actually have the DNA, we don't actually have the ability to fully enjoy. Only Krishna has that. So we get our enjoyment by giving Krishna enjoyment. When he enjoys, then we feel contentment, then we feel bliss and enjoyment. If we try to enjoy directly ourselves, it doesn't work. So Krishna has this enjoyment propensity so strongly that he manifested as his Hridini Shakti. He manifested Srimati Radharani. So in one sense, she's one with Krishna. She is Krishna. She's not a material living entity like us. She's Krishna's pleasure-giving potency. But she's different from Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada describes this as a really nice example, like the sun and the sunshine. Now it's a little cloudy, but sometimes we'll say the sun comes shining in the room. We'll say, oh, the sun's in the room. If the sun were actually in the room would cease to exist. So the sunshine and the sun are not the same, but you can't have sunshine without the sun. And the sunshine carries the potency of the sun, so they are the same. They're one and the same, but they're different. So in the same way, Srimati Radharani is Krishna, but she's not Krishna. Her purpose is to give Krishna pleasure, because Krishna likes to enjoy, and that's why we all exist. Each and every one of you exist because Krishna desires a specific kind of pleasure that only you can give him. No one else can give him. And our purpose in life is to discover, well, what is that? What is that service I can render Krishna that gives him pleasure that no one else can give him? In the same way, Krishna has a quality that you appreciate that no one else can see or appreciate. So there's a very unique relationship every living entity has with Krishna. That being said, this relationship with Krishna, this enjoyment propensity, is more fully fulfilled when we understand that devotional service, we all understand devotional service, right? That's why we're here, to engage in devotional service. Well, ultimately, in the absolute pure realm, in the true sense, we don't render devotional service to Krishna, in spite of us always telling you in the books and all we hear about render service to Krishna. Actually, we render service to Radharani, and she renders it to Krishna. So devotional service is under the auspices, or under the direction, you could say, of Srimati Radharani. We're helping her to render service to Krishna. And when we understand that, then our spiritual life blossoms and it becomes very full. Because if we help, at first it sounds counterintuitive. I want to serve Krishna. I'm going to serve someone else other than Krishna. But when we understand that Radharani is the best person, she's perfect, she knows how to give pleasure to Krishna. She knows how to make him happy. So if we help her make him happy, that's going to please Krishna more than if we try directly to serve him. So when we engage in devotional service, we're doing that to help Srimati Radha, help the spiritual master, and help Srimati Radha engage her service. So this is important to understand, and a very powerful vehicle for us to progress. Another reason that this is very, very powerful is that I remember working in the corporate world. I've spent most of my adult life working in the corporate world, unfortunately, but I learned very powerfully that if you want to have a meeting with the CEO or the CFO or somebody high in the company, you never go to them directly, even if you know them. You have a good relationship. You don't do it. You make friends and you become, you get on good terms with their assistants, the administrative assistant, and find out what they like, buy them some chocolate, do something to get on their good side. And then whenever you need something, you say, hey, I need 10 minutes with the CEO. I just need 15 minutes. Because if you go through the form, if you send an email and try to get on the calendar, yeah, she has an opening in 2 weeks from now. Like, oh, I can't wait 2 weeks. So you just call the assistant, say, hey, when can I get 5 minutes? And she'll say, well, if you come, at 11:25, you can come in and you have 5 minutes. And then you walk right in the door. It's relatively easy. If you try to go the formal route, it's not easy at all. What to speak of, that's just the CEO of a company. What to speak of a governor or the president or somebody important. It's even more, there may be a couple of people you have to please. But the point is, you go to someone that they trust, you get there, you get in with them, and then they'll get you in the door. And if they put you in the door, then the CEO says, oh, you're here because my assistant let you in, then you have my full attention. I trust her, I trust him. So this is how it works with Srimati Radharani. But because she has such a sweet, close relationship with Krishna, she recommends a devotee. Krishna doesn't even look at the qualifications. He doesn't even look at the resume. Radharani said, oh, here's a nice devotee. And Krishna says, okay, he's accepted. He doesn't even question, well, what qualification? Is he surrendered? Is he pure? Has he done this? And Krishna is not so easy. Krishna expects some perfection, right? When he came with Arjuna, what did he demand in Bhagavad Gita? What's the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita? Surrender, full surrender, not a little bit, but everything. So Krishna expects some pretty severe, pure devotion to service. He wants us to be qualified. Radharani is much more compassionate. Generally, we see females tend to be more compassionate than men, just in general, that they have a much kinder mood, softer heart. So we approach Radharani, Srimati Radharani, and we say, look, here's a flower, can you offer to Krishna? Here, can I do some service for you? She accepts it very easily because she's very kind. And when she offers to Krishna, immediately accepts. Where did you get this flower? Oh, this nice devotee gave. Krishna immediately accepts. So it's very important that we approach Krishna through Srimati Radharani. In fact, her loving propensity for Krishna is so strong. I'm sure you've heard this description before. It's so powerful that Krishna becomes bewildered. He becomes intoxicated. He can't understand. What is Radharani? What does she see in me? Why does she have so much love? What does she experience when she gives me this devotion and this love? So much so that he appeared as Lord Chaitanya. As we have Gauranitai here, he appeared as Lord Chaitanya to understand. What is it that the devotee feels? What is it Radharani feels when she worships me? So this is the potency of Srimati Radharani, very, very powerful love. There's interesting, this dynamic plays out in many different pastimes. Lord Chaitanya is a very famous one where Radharani, where Krishna and Radharani join as Lord Chaitanya to understand this mood. Krishna's often, there's many pastimes where he tries to understand this mood of Srimati Radharani. He tries to get inside her head, so to speak, and understand what is it that makes her, I get so bewildered, what goes on? And so there's a nice pastime, it's one of my favorites, called Prema Samputa. Samputa in Sanskrit means like a box or container. And prema is love. So Prema Samputa is this love box. It's like a locket. And it's a story, it's a pastime that describes Radharani's got this place deep in her heart where she's got all these jewels of different ways that she thinks about Krishna and loves him. So you can consider it like a love box full of jewels. She likes this about him. She feels that way about him. And Krishna wants to know what's in that little, I want to understand what's in that love locket. I want to know what's in the heart of Radharani. So he disguises himself as a demigoddess, a very beautiful demigoddess, and he approaches Radharani and asks her, I've seen this rasa dance. I've seen how Krishna treats you. We just read here how he goes off with her in the forest secluded, then he abandons her sometimes, and so this is Krishna disguised as a demigoddess. He's asking Radharani, why do you put up with it? Why do you let him treat you this way? It doesn't seem very nice. And Radharani said, no, you don't understand. It's not like that. And she said, no, I know it's like that. I've seen it. So this goes on. I'm sort of condensing, but it's a beautiful pastime. Krishna tends to like to do this. For me, it's one of those attractive features of Krishna is he takes great pleasure in disguising himself and approaching his devotee to extract what's in the devotee's heart. He does that with Devaprastha Thakur in Vrindavan. He comes as a little boy, and why are you here in the forest? You're blind, you're an old man. Well, I'm looking for Krishna. Who's this Krishna? Why do you want Krishna? You're old. Somebody should be taking care. You shouldn't be out here alone. And he's teasing him like that, although he's bringing him milk every day. And so why? And Bilvamangala Thakur has written some beautiful, I think Krishna Karnamrita is one, beautiful verses and slokas about so much love. So the point is Krishna will sometimes disguise himself so he can extract what's in the devotee's heart. They usually figure it out eventually. They say, wait a minute, this is not just any small boy. It's often after the fact, after he goes away, he thinks, I think that was Krishna, it was an ordinary boy. So this demigoddess is inquiring from Radharani different questions, and Radharani's explaining, but Radharani's a little shy. She's not going to reveal her heart to anyone. She says, I can't just tell you. You'll just run off and go gossip and talk to other people. And the demigoddess, who's Krishna, said, no, I'll stay here as your maidservant. I'll never go anywhere. I'll permanently just reside here. You're safe with me. Anything you tell me will not go anywhere. I won't tell anyone. And to prove it, I just won't even leave. I'll just stay here. So then Radharani trusts a little more, and they talk a little more. And then they get to a point where this demigoddess says, I heard that you can, it is rumored or said that you can just by thinking about Krishna make him appear. And I don't believe that's true. I'd have to see that. You'd have to convince me. It just seems like an incredible thing that you can just, at your will, invoke him to come. And so they talk some more, and the demigoddess persuades or convinces Radharani to demonstrate this ability. And Radharani closes her eyes and thinks really, really deeply about Krishna, and to the point where you can just see by looking at her, you can feel the love that she has. She's just so into her whole being is just focused on Krishna. And Krishna's becoming, overwhelmed and ecstatic. And of course, then he reveals who he is, and she opens her eyes, and Krishna's there. And Krishna took off his disguise. And then Radharani was happy, and she knew that would happen because whenever she thinks of Krishna, they unite. And then Radharani turned to Lalita Vishaka and said, well, what happened to the demigoddess? Where did she go? The whole point is for her to see that Krishna's here. And they said, oh, yeah, she saw and she ran off and she had to do something, but she's convinced, she understands. We'll go find her. And they run off, and then Krishna and Radharani, they're exploring the contents of this love locket. So this pastime, which I didn't do justice to, is a beautiful story, and I kind of condensed it to a few minutes, but it demonstrates that it's just one example of how Krishna is very eager to understand what's in the heart of his devotees and what's in the heart of Radharani. What is it that Radharani feels when she worships me and sees me? What is it that drives her to act in such a way that just completely intoxicates me and maddens me. What is, he's so attracted by her. So that's just one example. It's a nice, it's a beautiful story. And this was written in Apraham by His Holiness Shiram Swami, and the way he tells it, Radharani never did figure out that she kept looking for the demigoddess, and Lalita and Vishaka, oh, we'll go get her, don't worry about that, you stay here. And so it's a sweet pastime, but it demonstrates how much Krishna wants to understand the heart of Radharani, as does with Lord Chaitanya. It's the same mood that he came for two reasons. Externally, Lord Chaitanya came to teach us how to be a devotee, how a devotee worships Krishna. And he demonstrated that very effectively. Internally, he came because he wanted to understand what do Radharani and devotees in general, what do they experience when they worship me? Krishna is very captivated. He's purchased by love. It's described that when one has pure love, and that has to have some qualification. It can't be just simple superficial love. The two qualities that it has to have is it has to be unmotivated. We have to love Krishna just for the simple fact that he's lovable, he's beautiful, and we're not going to get anything in return. We don't want anything in return. We're just happy to do something for Krishna, because when we serve Krishna, then we feel pleasure. And if there's some thought or expectation or offer of return, it diminishes it. Prahlad Maharaj, when he was delivered by Hiranyakashipu wanted to give him some boon, and Prahlad was not happy. That was very distasteful. What, you're offering me some boon? What do you think, this is a merchant? You think I'm just serving you to get something? He was hurt. He said, no, I don't want anything. If you have to give me something, then you can deliver my father. Take the boon and give it to someone else. This is very traditional. There's a beautiful pastime with Ambarish Maharaj. Durvasa Muni, you probably heard, he was cursed. And Durvasa Muni, long story, when all of he's chased, he offended Ambarish, and so Sudarshan Chakran went after him, and Ambarish ran all over the universe trying to avoid this punishment. And finally he comes to, Lord Brahma, Indra, everybody, and finally he comes to Vishnu, comes to Krishna and says, please protect me. He says, well, I can't help you. What do you mean you can't help me? The Supreme Lord is known to be all merciful, so anyone who takes shelter of you, you give him mercy, so you can give me mercy. You have such a generous heart. You can help me. You're famous for having a very generous heart. Krishna says, I don't have a heart. I can't help you. And the rest of is like, what do you mean? It makes no sense. He said, well, my devotees worship me very nicely, and I'm always trying to reciprocate with them, but they won't accept anything. Anything I offer my devotees, they reject it. They just want to give me their love. They want to worship me, and they won't let me give them anything in return. He said, so the only thing I can do is give them something that they value. If I give them something they value, then they'll accept it. So the only thing they value is me. So I gave them my heart, and then they're happy. So I gave my heart to my devotees. So if you want some mercy or compassion, you have to go to my devotees. I don't have any. I gave it to them because it's the only thing they would accept. So this is the mood of a devotee. He doesn't want anything. He just wants to worship Krishna because Krishna is worshipable. He's lovable. So that's one qualification of our service, of our mood to Krishna. The other is it needs to be uninterrupted. It has to just keep going. If there's a really nice verse, which I can never remember, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's quoted, I think it's in Adi Leela. It says, if there's a relationship, you have a relationship with somebody, and if there's a cause for that relationship to be disrupted, somebody does something that should cause a disruption, if there's a cause for the relationship to be broken and the relationship's not interrupted, That's very, very special. That's love, where maybe somebody does something and normally it would bother us or offend us or hurt us, but we're not affected. We just say, look, it doesn't matter. Then this is uninterrupted. And so this is when we have this mood of service to Krishna, that no matter what, and we see this in different verses, Shastaka, there's different verses that we hear this sentiment come out. Lord Chaitanya is famous in his last verse of his Shastakam. In Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you know, whether you kill me or kick me or whatever you do, it doesn't matter. When we have this mood of, well, I'm going to worship Krishna because he's lovable, because he's so beautiful and he's so wonderful, and I don't want anything in return. And no matter what he does, or no matter how hard it is, or what gets in the way, there's a nice example of a woman. She was elderly woman in Vrindavan, and her service every day was to bring water for the pujaris to bathe the deities in the morning, which meant early, because they had to bathe the deities, you know, early. So she's out there before the sun comes up to go fetch water in Vrindavan. I don't know how many of you have been to Vrindavan, but in the wintertime it can get cold there in India, just like most places, except maybe not so cold in Florida, but it gets cold. And every morning she would go get this water. And Srila Prabhupada said, because she's so determined that whether she's ill or whether it's cold or hot, it doesn't matter. She's just doing her service so that the pujaris can have their water. She will go back to Godhead. So he was demonstrated this determination. So when it doesn't matter how we feel, what time, you know, what the obstacle is, still we're just going to focus on my service to Krishna, my love for Krishna, and it has no motivation. When those two qualities are there, then Krishna becomes purchased, and he becomes, I want to say competitive almost. That if we look at the life of Srila Prabhupada, I can't even describe it properly, how much he did for Krishna. Books, temples, traveled the world at an elderly age. He gave so much service to Krishna. And yet, if you sit back and look, you can see how much Krishna did for him. Right? He sent devotees, he sent money, he sent help. And for having worked in the corporate world, if you have a company like Coca-Cola, everybody knows the brand Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Apple or any big company. They spend billions and billions of dollars over many, many years so that everybody understands that name, Coca-Cola. That didn't happen by accident. There's billboards plastered up. Today it's websites and less print, but more digital. But companies spend tremendous amounts of money, millions of dollars. I've seen it. National Geographic used to work. There's millions of dollars so people can understand who we are and what we represent. And Srila Prabhupada did it with practically no money in the beginning and no formal support. In just 10 or 12 years, Hare Krishna became a household word because of course, because of his surrender and his disciples, but Krishna reciprocated. He said, okay, you want to serve me? Well, watch this. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to send you help. I'm going to send you disciples, devotees. I'm going to send you money. And so when one has that uninterrupted, unmotivated love, then Krishna becomes purchased and thinks, okay, this devotee, I want to service, I want to reciprocate. Krishna's all about reciprocation. He likes to, and he's dramatic, he likes to reciprocate. So this is the kind of eternal love affair between Krishna and Srimati Radharani. They're constantly, let me do this for your pleasure, and the other, no, let me do this for your pleasure. And so we're caught up in that, we're part of that. And when we understand that, let me help Srimati Radharani, because she knows, her and her girlfriends, the Sakhis, they know how to give pleasure to Krishna. And so when we help them in their service, then Krishna becomes very pleased and everyone benefits. It's like you water the roots and the whole tree flourishes. So when they're happy, then Krishna's happy, then we have no choice to be happy because we're part and parcel of Krishna. So if Krishna's happy, we're going to know it. We're going to experience it. And yeah, I've totally lost track of time. I don't know. Earlier, later, or what? I tend to ramble on sometimes. So one last point, which I don't want to end on this point. So maybe someone have a question, or we can end on a better note. But it's an important point that this word aparad. We've heard this word aparad, offense. Right? What does aparad mean? And there's different types. And this isn't a discussion about aparad, but there's Vaishnava aparad, different nam aparad. There's different types of offenses. But it really struck me when I first heard this. Apa, and I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, and maybe some of you know Sanskrit better than I do, but apa is like bad or against. It's a prefix. So it's basically an aparad, offense means against Radha. Aparadha, aparad. We commit we do something that's not helping Radharani to serve Krishna. Then it's an offense. And so that can be very subtle, it can be on our mind, it can be external, so it's something we need to be very careful about. But it just struck me how this thing that we're always trying to avoid, these aparads, these offenses, at the heart of them, it means that these things are not going to assist Radharani, Srimati Radharani, in her service to Krishna. So therefore, that's why they're offensive. That's why we get a reaction. It's because we're not helping her. And so it's just important to understand that all of our thoughts and deeds, we should be thinking, is this going to help Srimati Radharani in her service to Krishna? If it is, then I should accept it and do it to the best of my capability. And if it's not, then I should refrain. Because if I can help Srimati Radharani in any small little way, then my life is successful, and Krishna will take over from there. So it's a wonderful day. She's very merciful. On Janmashtami, we fast until midnight. On Radhashtami, we fast until noon. So which would you prefer? I know for me, I'm happy to wait till noon. But so she's very, very merciful, and we're all, we're all under her care, you could say. So yeah. So maybe I'll stop there. Not take up too much of your time. But does anyone have any questions or comments? Hopefully ones I can answer.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the wonderful glorification of Srimati Radharani. You were speaking about an uninterrupted service, and I was thinking of the 8th verse of Shikshashtakam, Ashri Sheva Padaratam Nashtamam, and in relation to Srimati Radharani's mood of uninterrupted service, I was thinking if you could speak a little bit more about that verse and how it relates to Srimati Radharani.
I'm sorry, you're referring to the eighth verse, you said.
The last verse.
The last verse. Well, in relation to Srimati Radharani, so the verse, everyone's familiar with this verse, oh Lord, let me see if I'm familiar with it. You're my Supreme Lord, you can do anything and everything. You are always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. I'm forgetting something in the beginning. But I know no one but Krishna is my Lord. Thank you. You can do it. Yeah. Thank you. I've gotten rusty all days. So this mood of total surrender, that it's unmotivated and it's assumed, it's uninterrupted, that this mood doesn't stop and you don't feel it for 5 minutes in the morning and then the rest of the day, you feel something else. So it's there. It's exemplified in Srimati Rani, and we see this in different pastimes where Krishna appears to neglect her or go off with someone else. There's a very intense set of verses. So that verse, that in fact the whole Shikshashtaka is from the Anchalila, Chaitanya Charitamrita, the last chapter. I think it's chapter 20. And it's interesting, there's like 2 verses for each one. It's just described in different ways, but so over the course of about 40 verses, it contains, 30 or 40 verses, it contains the whole Shikshashtaka. It repeats each verse a couple times, 2-3 times sometimes. And so after that, so then you've concluded the Shikshastakam. You're in this mood of Krishna can do anything and everything. And then it goes on to quote some other verses that Lord Chaitanya quotes in Srimati Radharani. He's quoting her. And it's very intimate, it's very profound. It's not something that we usually discuss with beginners in Bhakti Yoga, but she describes, Lord Chaitanya is quoting verses, slokas that Radharani says, and Radharani's describing, Krishna, if you will be happy with someone else, I'll go get that person and bring him to you. Even if doing that gives me pain. Because if it gives you pleasure, then that pain is my pleasure. So just like dwell on that for a minute. If Krishna asks us to do something that we find difficult or painful, then by doing that, I can give a small example, just because I guess it's a real example, although I shouldn't talk about myself. But I was just recently in Australia with Mukund Maharaj, and he'd invited someone to come over and to the farm there in Murwillumbah. And it was thought this person would get some other arrangement, and they ended up just like needing a place to stay. In the house where Maharaj is very small, there's like his room and servants' quarters and a kitchen, and that's about it. And so I experienced this, I got a little taste of this verse, that then I was put in a situation where I had to do something. I had to give this person some facility that made my life uncomfortable. And I wasn't so happy about it at first, because I thought, well, this doesn't feel right. Like there should be some remedy to this situation, because why do I have to be uncomfortable? Like something just didn't seem right about the situation. But it was during the month of Purushottama Mas, and I'm there with my spiritual master, so I'm thinking, well, good grief, just do some service. Just, be humble and try to do some service. Don't worry about what makes you comfortable. And then this sweetness, then you can see this sweetness. When you do something for someone else that makes their life comfortable, then if that person's important to you, then you're happy. And if you go through some little difficulty to do it, so what? And I didn't experience that until after the fact. After it was all over, I looked back and I said, oh, that wasn't so bad. In fact, it was kind of nice because everybody's happy. So my discomfort turned into a sense of, I felt a little satisfied that I was able to do something that made Maharaj's life easier and this other person's life easier. And so this was the mood that Radharani has. This is the mood Lord Chaitanya was saying, that whatever Krishna does, that the measure in those verses is described, that the measure of happiness isn't based here. The measure of happiness is based on, is Krishna happy? If Krishna's happy, I'm happy. And if he's not happy, then how can I be happy? So that's kind of the point that's being demonstrated. There's a famous story where Krishna had a headache one day, and he asked Narada Muni to get me some dust from the feet of his devotees. He went all over, and long story, but he had a hard time getting dust. Who's going to give the dust from their feet to put on Krishna's head? If Krishna walked in the door, would we ask him to bow down so I could put my foot on top of your head? It's not a palatable meditation. And yet when Narada Muni went to the Brahmanas and all so many learned people, he couldn't get any dust. And he went to Raj, he went to the gopis, and Krishna has a headache, he needs the dust from your feet. Okay, here. He said, well, wait a minute, don't you understand that you go to hell for this kind of offense? You can't do that. So what? We don't care. If Krishna is his relief from his headache, we're happy. And so then Narada Muni could understand. There's many examples. Different devotees that Krishna would send to Vrindavan. You want to understand what my devotees feel. You want to understand what real love is. Go to Vrindavan, see the Vrajavasis. So this is the mood that Lord Chaitanya is exemplifying, and this is Radharani's mood. Let me do that thing that gives Krishna pleasure, even if it causes me some difficulty, because Krishna's pleasure, then I'm happy. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. I'm just this unmotivated and uninterrupted is such an amazing goal and meditation, and I'm like so far from that. Get interrupted all the time, mostly by my own desires, material like desires to enjoy separately from Krishna. Of course, that's only. So how can I? And I know it's gradual, but what can my meditation be to just continuously cultivate that the elevation towards that mood of unmotivated energy?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I feel like you do. It's like a lofty goal, and I'm so far from it that it's like, well, that sounds great on paper, but I can't do it. So how do I benefit from it? And two things come to mind. One is to understand that devotional service isn't something that's physical. There is a disciple of His Holiness Giriraj Swami, I forget her name, I always forget her name. She got cancer, and her service, her whole life was as an artist. She would paint, do very creative things for Krishna, for the temple, the deities, different things. And then later she got cancer and she couldn't paint anymore. And she was in Vrindavan and she felt very depressed. It's like, I can't do my service. And so my service is my connection to Krishna, and I can't do it, so I have no connection to Krishna. And so Giriraj Swami taught her that devotional service is inside. It doesn't require hands or legs. It's in our consciousness. It's we can serve Krishna with no arms, no legs, no eyes, no paintbrush. And so then that helped her. And then she prepared and she left. She ended up leaving her body, but it helped her develop a deeper relationship with Krishna. So that's one point to think about. So when we think of unmotivated and uninterrupted, doesn't mean physical, that maybe every day we can't come to the temple. There's things that get in our way from doing what we normally do. We have to understand that doesn't mean I can't serve Krishna. I can. So that's one point. The other point, the Prabhupada says, and this is it was an answer to a slightly different question, but it still applies. It relates to this, is that, what if I can't, I think Prabhupada was talking about crying for Krishna. Well, what if I can't cry for Krishna? Well, then cry that you can't cry for Krishna. Well, what if I can't do that? Well, then just wish that you could cry for Krishna. All of those things equal the same thing. They take you to the same place. That while I want to be doing that, well, I can't do it. Well, I should want to do that. Well, someday I will want to do that. Right? And so by cultivating that mentality, and in terms of absorption, we were talking with some devotee friends recently, this idea of absorption keeps coming up, smarnam, hearing, remembering. And there's an interesting, where was it? There's an interesting class a devotee mentioned, I think it was in the Alachua temple, that there's different kinds of service, hearing, chanting, different things we do for 9 processes. Smarnam is interesting because you can do hearing and chanting and serving, and your mind can be someplace else. You can be chanting and your mind's over here. I can be worshiping the deities, my mind's over there. But remembering, when you're remembering Krishna, you can't be anywhere else. Because if you're somewhere else, you're not remembering Krishna. And so as we become more absorbed, then naturally we become more attached and other things become less interesting, and the distraction, it becomes harder to distract us because something comes up and we're like, no, thank you, I'm not interested. But if we're not absorbed, then other things look at my Devi is very good. She will convince us that something's worthwhile. And then next thing we know, we're off in left field, and how did I get here? And so by hearing constantly and reading and absorbing ourselves in these different pastimes and these different concepts, then the mind becomes more filled. And there's a beautiful verse in the 11th canto, another one I can never remember, 2021, I forget which chapter, but it's an amazing verse. Krishna says that although you're trying to render service to me, sometimes you fall down from that service and you can't fulfill it. He said, you should be happy that you've fallen down from it. I'm paraphrasing, but he's saying basically, you're trying to do this and you fall away and you're not able to do it. Krishna says, you should be happy. It's like, makes no sense. I'll be happy when I can do it. And Krishna says, no, you should still be happy because you understand this is the goal. And even though you can't attain it, whatever your distraction is, you understand this is the goal. And because you understand that, eventually you'll attain it. So don't focus on the fact that you're not attaining it. Just understand that you know what the goal is. And because you know what the goal is, there's no question eventually you'll get it, because I'm going to help you get it. So don't be discouraged, just be happy. And it's just a really profound verse. I wish I could remember it to quote the actual Sanskrit. I can look it up and send it to you. But it's a wonderful verse that Krishna is saying, yeah, you're trying so hard to attain me, and if it looks like you can't do it, no worries, I've got you. Because you're trying, and the main point of it is because you know what the goal is. There's a wonderful statement Adipurusha made at the Japa retreat. It says, Krishna doesn't see us based on where we are. He sees us based on where we want to be. It's all about desire. We cultivate our desire, and then Krishna reciprocates with that desire. Okay, wherever you are isn't a factor. You want to be here. You want to serve me like this. You want to have this relationship. Well, let me reciprocate with you in that way. Krishna is so merciful, and Radharani even more so. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, Shruti, I have another question I'm going over. One more in the back.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned in the beginning of your class that there's a few reasons why Radharani is not really revealed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Mm-hmm. Can you explain as to why?
Yeah, there's two reasons mainly. One is because the Bhagavatam, it's kind of a long story about the Vedas and the Bhagavatam and how it came to be. Vyasadeva wrote all the Vedas and he wasn't satisfied, and Narada Muni appears. So that's because you haven't talked about the Supreme Lord. You give the Vedas, people are going to get bewildered and they're going to just stay in the material world, think that's okay. So then he wrote the Bhagavatam, but the purpose of the Bhagavatam is to attract people to Krishna. So I remember I had a profound experience once with my spiritual master. Like I said, I've been working in the corporate world. So for years, every year I'd go visit my spiritual master, and I'd always complain about this job, I have to work and it takes me away from devotees and I can't do service full time and it's just so hard. And I would phrase it in different ways that didn't sound like whining, but basically, I was whining about the fact that I had a job and I had to work and I couldn't just do service full time, which I could have, but it was a choice I made. So one day, I don't forget what exactly I said, something along that line, and he responds, he said, well, Srila Prabhupada wrote these books for non-devotees. Because I think the comment I made was, it's so hard to associate with non-devotees all day. And Prabhupada said, Maharaj said, well, Prabhupada wrote these books for non-devotees. And it kind of stunned me. It's like, well, that's true. When Prabhupada came to America, there weren't any devotees. And so the Bhagavatam is written for materialistic people to attract them and pull them out of the material energy. So it's got all these descriptions of Krishna and his pastimes, of course, in the 10th canto, but descriptions of universal form. The whole Bhagavatam is basically meant, it's aimed at people who have little or no taste of spiritual life, to give them a taste, to pull them out. And so it's not designed for people who already are fed up with the material world and attached to Krishna. It's kind of a basic mindset of, look, let's get these people out of the materialistic mode and let's captivate them so they can engage. So you don't give like this verse I mentioned about when Radharani is saying, if Krishna wants to be with someone else, I'll go get her and bring her to Krishna, even if it breaks my heart, because if he's happy, I'm happy. That's not a concept you talk to on Harinam when you're giving somebody a book and they've never heard anything about Krishna, because they're going to look at you like, well, no thanks, I'm not interested in that kind of a thing. That's a more advanced spiritual concept of surrender. So that's the reason that Radharani is very intimate. She's a very, very intimate associate with Krishna. And so she's a little bit not revealed right up front. That's the external reason that it's not discussed. Later, when you get into writings of Goswamis and other places, she's discussed quite openly. But the Bhagavatam, its main audience is not devotees, its main audience. I mean, it's, for us, the Bhagavatam's nectar, but it's let's pull people in and get them to a point where they understand who Krishna is, and then we can talk about, because she's intimate, it's internal. The other reason is internal is because Shukadev Goswami, because devotees, as they become more absorbed, like more fixed in that interrupted mood, when they think of Radharani and the relationship with Krishna, it evokes very deep emotions. And Shukadev Goswami was concerned that if he spoke Radharani's name or talked about her, he would just go in an ecstasy and he would not be able to finish talking about the Bhagavatam. He would be stunned. Because he would remember, he would be thinking about Krishna and all these internal pastimes, these intimate spiritual pastimes. And generally, not always, but generally when that happens, you don't care about the external world anymore. You can't really interact with people, And so Shukadev Goswami was like, let me finish the Bhagavatam. If I go there, then I'm going to lose composure. And I need to finish these verses for this audience. And not everyone in the audience was pure devotees. And some of King Parikshit's questions were on behalf of them, that they thought, well, how can this be and how can that be? Because not all of them were convinced of the absolute truth. And so Parikshit's questions were to address that. And so Shukadev Goswami was a little concerned that he would be able to retain composure and finish the discussion, finish the discourse. And if he started getting into these more intimate things, he would just become too ecstatic and not be able to speak. Those are the two reasons that I'm aware of. I think we're going to get the hook now. I've gone way over time. Uttaraj Shri Bhagavatam ki jai, Srimati Radharani ki.